a $2,400 increase to Social Security benefits, and Bernie Sanders praising Donald Trump? Sounds like something straight out of a political thriller, right? Well, you're about to learn the shocking truth behind these headlines. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end for this one. In today's video, we're breaking down why Bernie Sanders is praising Trump's plan, what it really means for Social Security, and the truth behind those $2,400 benefit increase rumors. You're not going to want to miss this. By the end of this video, you'll understand what's really going on between Sanders and Trump, whether or not there's any chance of a $2,400 Social Security boost, and what these political moves mean for your money in 2025. Stay tuned to get the full picture. Welcome to Financial Area, your go-to source for clear, honest updates on everything that affects your finances. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps a lot. Let's dive right in. By now, you've probably seen headlines floating around that Bernie Sanders is praising Donald Trump, and not just any praise, he's actually backing one of Trump's plans. But hold on a second. This is a bit of a shocker, right? Bernie Sanders, the progressive senator from Vermont, praising Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner for 2024? These two usually don't agree on anything, let alone policy. For most of us, the idea of Sanders and Trump working together feels like a fantasy. Bernie's all about expanding social safety nets like Medicare and Social Security, while Trump's policies are usually focused on tax cuts, deregulation, and limiting government spending. These two don't exactly sit at the same table on many issues. So why are these headlines out there saying that Sanders is praising Trump? Is it true? And what could it possibly mean for Americans who are depending on benefits like Social Security, Medicare, and other programs? Here's where things get interesting. If you look at these headlines closely, you'll see that what Sanders is actually praising Trump for isn't his overall agenda. It's a specific policy proposal Trump made regarding credit card interest rates. According to Sanders, he's willing to work with Trump on this one issue, limiting credit card interest rates to a maximum of 10%. But let's pause for a moment and think about that. The average credit card interest rate in the U.S. right now is well over 20%, so the idea of limiting it to 10% could have a significant impact, especially for people struggling with high-interest debt. Now, if you're someone carrying a balance on your credit cards, you know exactly how brutal those high interest rates can be. It's a serious burden for millions of Americans, especially those living paycheck to paycheck. So this proposal, if it goes through, could be a game changer for people with credit card debt. So what exactly is Bernie Sanders praising here? Well, in a recent interview, Sanders said he'd be willing to work with Trump if he follows through with this plan. He's not endorsing all of Trump's policies. He's specifically talking about this one idea to limit the maximum interest rate on credit cards. Now, let's get into why this is so important. Credit card debt in America has reached astronomical levels. In fact, we're talking about a national credit card debt of over $1.17 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T. And that number has been climbing at an alarming rate. Capping credit card interest rates at 10% would cut the current average by more than 50%, which could bring much-needed relief to millions of Americans facing financial struggles. For Bernie Sanders, a policy like this aligns with his long-standing opposition to Wall Street practices and his efforts to protect consumers from predatory lending. So while it might seem strange to hear Sanders supporting Trump on anything, this issue could be one area where they agree, and it's something that could directly benefit everyday Americans. Imagine paying less in interest every month on your credit cards. For people carrying high-interest balances, that could mean hundreds of dollars saved annually. If this proposal ever gets off the ground, it would represent a rare moment of bipartisan agreement on an issue that affects millions of people's daily financial lives. In the context of rising living costs, stagnant wages, and record levels of credit card debt, this is a policy that could help ease the financial strain on working-class Americans. And while Sanders' praise for Trump might seem like a temporary political oddity, the potential impact on consumers is very real. Now, let's get to the big question. the $2,400 Social Security increase. You've probably seen headlines saying Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are somehow working together on this massive boost. But let's be clear, these headlines are misleading, and here's why. The idea of a $2,400 increase in Social Security benefits has been floating around for a while, and it's tied to various pieces of legislation Bernie Sanders has championed. However, there's no concrete evidence that Trump and Sanders are teaming up on this specific increase. In fact, the headline linking them directly to this $2,400 increase is more about speculation than reality. While Sanders has been pushing for increases to Social Security benefits, like a $200 per month increase or a more permanent adjustment for inflation, there is no plan on the table from him or Trump that would result in a $2,400 one-time increase. Let's talk about the legislation that's currently on the table. Bernie Sanders, along with other Senate Democrats, has been pushing for a $200 per month increase for Social Security recipients. This is part of a broader effort to adjust benefits to keep up with inflation and provide more support to seniors, disabled Americans, and others living on fixed incomes. Another significant piece of legislation that Sanders is backing is the Social Security Fairness Act, which aims to eliminate the windfall elimination provision that unfairly reduces benefits for certain public sector workers. But even though these are important reforms, none of them come anywhere close to the $2,400 increase people are talking about. Here's the issue. For a $2,400 increase to become reality, it would require passing new legislation. And right now, there's no bill moving through Congress that would provide this kind of one-time or recurring boost. What people are likely confusing is the ongoing discussion about increasing Social Security benefits, but that's very different from a $2,400 lump sum. Let's not forget the political reality here. We're rapidly approaching the end of the year, and Congress is dealing with a packed agenda. If something like this was going to happen before 2025, it would have to be introduced and passed quickly. But with lawmakers focused on so many other priorities, like budget issues and the upcoming elections, there's little chance a $2,400 boost could be pulled off in the next few weeks. So, what does this mean for Social Security in 2025? While a $2,400 increase seems highly unlikely at this point, there is a chance that we could see a more modest increase in benefits. The current cost of living adjustments, COLAs, are based on inflation, and some experts predict that these adjustments could be higher in the coming years, but still nowhere near the level of a $2,400 jump. Expect more discussions and perhaps gradual increases in benefits, especially if lawmakers like Sanders continue pushing for change. But it's important to understand that these reforms take time, and Congress is notorious for moving slowly when it comes to major social programs like Social Security. If you're relying on Social Security, it's crucial to stay informed and continue to advocate for change. Whether it's through letters to your representatives or supporting legislation like the Social Security Fairness Act, every bit of attention can make a difference. But don't expect any dramatic one-time payouts in the near future. Let's be honest. A $2,400 increase to Social Security would be a massive win for millions of Americans. After all, many seniors and disabled people are struggling to make ends meet on fixed incomes. So it's understandable why this rumor gets traction. People want it to be true. But here's where the headlines can be misleading. They take a grain of truth, like Sanders pushing for higher Social Security benefits, and blow it up into something it's not. It's a classic case of clickbait. Headlines designed to get your attention, but not necessarily tell you the full story. While it's tempting to get excited about these headlines, it's important to remember that misinformation can lead to unrealistic expectations. If you're hoping for a sudden windfall in Social Security, you might end up disappointed. But that doesn't mean we should give up on advocating for meaningful changes, just that we need to keep our expectations grounded in reality. As we look toward 2025, it's crucial to understand the current landscape of Social Security reform and the very real challenges that Congress faces in making any significant changes. The truth is, the window for any major legislation to pass before the new year is rapidly closing. Lawmakers are under immense pressure to address a variety of issues, from funding the government to preparing for the 2024 elections. With only a few weeks left in this legislative session, there's very little time to push through a large-scale reform, let alone a $2,400 boost to Social Security benefits. The reality is that these types of sweeping changes take time, and they often get delayed or blocked by political gridlock. In addition to the legislative bottleneck, we also have to consider the financial limitations that come with adjusting Social Security. While inflation has driven up the cost of living, and the COLA, cost of living adjustment, has seen higher than usual increases in recent years, a massive infusion of funds into the system, like the $2,400 figure some are hoping for, would require substantial changes to how Social Security is funded and distributed. Any significant reform would likely take years to put into place, as it requires not only legislative approval, but also changes to the funding mechanisms that support the program. For now, incremental changes seem more likely, perhaps a modest increase in benefits, or a more generous COLA adjustment to help recipients keep up with inflation. Additionally, there's the issue of public support and political will. Social Security reform, especially when it comes to increasing benefits, is an area where both Republicans and Democrats have differing views. Sanders' push for increases aligns with his progressive agenda, but there's significant resistance from those on the other side of the aisle who argue against expanding benefits without addressing the long-term sustainability of the program. Without broad bipartisan support, meaningful reforms are difficult to pass, which is why it's important to keep expectations in check. Despite the odds, the advocacy for Social Security reform is far from over. Legislators like Bernie Sanders will continue to push for change, especially as we approach the 2024 election season. They understand that millions of Americans rely on Social Security to make ends meet, and any attempts to strengthen the program will remain a top priority for many lawmakers. However, even if we don't see a massive $2,400 boost in the near future, ongoing efforts to increase Social Security benefits and address issues like the windfall elimination provision or the fairness of the COLA adjustments will remain a key part of the national conversation in the coming years. Ultimately, the fight for a more equitable Social Security system is ongoing, but it's a slow-moving process that requires patience and persistent advocacy. As we move into 2025, the focus will likely shift to the new Congress and whether the political environment will allow for substantial reform, or if lawmakers will focus on smaller changes. One thing is clear: while the headlines may promise big wins, the path to meaningful reform is complex and often frustrating, with many steps ahead before we see any concrete results. For now, the best thing you can do is stay informed, continue advocating for fair benefits, and keep an eye on how the political landscape evolves in the coming months. In conclusion, while the idea of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump teaming up on a $2,400 Social Security increase may sound enticing, it remains a misleading headline, designed to grab attention rather than reflect the reality of the situation. Sanders has been pushing for reforms that could bring much-needed relief to Social Security recipients, but a one-time $2,400 boost is not on the table, nor is there a clear path for such an increase in the near future. The truth is, any major reform to Social Security will take time and require broad political support, something that's difficult to achieve in the current climate.